Hey everyone, so in this video, I'm going to pull the curtain back a little bit and show you some of my shooting and editing steps that I took to take an image that straight out of camera looks something like this, and then eventually make it look something like this. Welcome once again. If it's your first time here to the channel, my name is Matthew. I am an interiors and architecture photographer based in Kansas City. Okay, a little bit of background as to why I wanted to record a YouTube video relating to this image. A couple situations popped up recently. One, which is pretty obvious, is the shoot itself. Although the photo itself is probably not going to win any awards, it's not the most amazing image that you or myself has ever seen. There was a lot that went into the shoot, but there was a lot that went into just simply shooting and editing this one photo. So like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I just wanted to pull the curtain back a little bit and just show you some of the steps that goes from all the way from setting the camera up to delivering the final image to the client. The second reason I wanted to make this video was based on a conversation that I had with a prospective custom home builder client. Now, I won't name the other photography company. Basically, the question that I was asked by this home builder was, what's the difference between you, Matthew, and this other, let's just call him ABC Real Estate Photography? Now, honestly, what I wanted to say was something like this, but clearly being a prospective client, somebody that I eventually wanted to shoot for, I had to take a step back and be really tactful in how I was going to answer this question. Sometimes, though, the easiest way to relay that kind of information is to show somebody instead of just telling them. Hence this video. So if you are a photographer watching this video to hopefully maybe glean a couple tips and tricks as far as shooting or editing, great. Hopefully you'll get something out of it. On the other hand, if you are part of a company or business that, say, hires architectural photographers on a regular basis and maybe are kind of curious what all goes into producing a single image, well, hopefully you get something out of this video too. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of background about this shoot. So this was for an architecture firm based here in Kansas City, but this project itself was actually down in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So a little bit of a day trip down there, not a big deal, only roughly about 3 hours away. We started off with this shot. This is kind of the hero shot of the living room. Now, I know some photographers would look at this and go, hey, this is way too wide. We actually shot this with the Laowa. I think it's the 17mm shift lens. I did a review on this lens not long ago, and yeah, that's what we shot this image with. Now, the reason we wanted to shoot this big, like I said, this is the hero shot, and this shot was sort of mimicking a rendering that they had done and really showed almost exactly what the rendering did as far as all the other elements of the house, not only the living space and that dining room space you see dead center, but also where everything is in relation to the second story and the piano room to the left, the fireplace on the right, things like that. So this was one of those situations where, you know, normally I don't shoot that wide, but I needed to. And thank goodness I had a lens that went that wide. I really am glad I had the 17mm shift lens on me. So a little bit of background, as you can see here on the file, the first shot I took right after I'd set up the tripod, got it exactly at the position I wanted, level everything, make sure everything's straight and good. Yeah, took the first shot at 9:02 a.m. Took some different exposures, and this is where things got a little tricky at the beginning of the shoot. We wanted, ideally, to have the couch in the shot, but as we were going through the frames, we would take the photo and then see it on the iPad. We'd blow it up and see it pretty large instead of just looking on the back of the camera. We realized there was not a perfect spot for the couch. We tried so many different positions, and then after a while, we just decided to get rid of the couch completely. And so by the time, let's see, what was the last frame? This was the last frame where we attempted to get the couch in the shot, and that was at 9:17. So from the first shot that we took to the time we made the decision to 86 the couch, roughly about 15 minutes. So we haven't even started shooting the official images yet, and we're 15 minutes into the shoot. So here we're taking different frames, doing our best to try to move the couch so it doesn't appear in the shot. And we had a heck of a time trying to figure this out. You don't see it in the shot, but the couch ends up moving over into the kitchen. So we Anyway, I can't get into it because you won't understand since this is the only shot you're seeing of this. But it's, as you saw, it's a sectional couch, and we had to wrap it around a wall within the kitchen to get it out of frame. Not easy, to say the least. Anyway, so as you can see here, bit by bit, we just kept moving the couch to get it out of frame. And finally, we came to a compromise. If you get it just out of frame enough, I can deal with this in Photoshop. This little corner of the couch that's peeking out, that's manageable in Photoshop. This, not so much, but yeah, I can deal with that. Then clearly we had the ottoman, had to get rid of that. And the other part I realized that was still there in the shot is this little gray arm. This gray chair and part of the arm is sticking out. So there is me ghostly walking across, and the architect and designer's left foot, I believe. And so now at this point, we are analyzing the still frame and really picking apart what needs to stay and what needs to go. Aside from the couch, we had to figure out, as far as little knickknacks and tchotchkes that are laying around, what needs to stay in the shot. And there were definitely some things that were pretty obvious we needed to get rid of. Shot by shot, we're analyzing and seeing what all looks good. Clearly we simplified, or the architect simplified some things. We had to straighten some things out, reshuffle things so it looks proportionate, especially on this little countertop here to the left of the dining room table. And as you can tell too, between this frame and the other frame, we had to be really meticulous about the position of the chairs and the table. This is one thing, if you're going to do a one-point perspective, you really have to make sure that you nail down. Since you are shooting a photo that is based on symmetry, you have to make sure things, especially center of the frame, are symmetrical. So if your chairs aren't lined up perfect, it's going to kind of stick out like a sore thumb. So make sure to get that taken care of. And yeah, we lined up the chairs correctly, and then just frame by frame, kind of kept moving things inch by inch to just make sure that everything looked absolutely perfect the way the architect and designer wanted. And that's when we started actually shooting. So at this point, let's see, where are we at? Let's assume this bright exposure was the first one of our official one. We're at 9:34. So we are now a half hour into this one shot before we started taking the official images that I would potentially use in the edit. So now I just kind of bracket, I usually take an image about 2 stops, overexposed, and then just go down 2 clicks every time, just so I have plenty of data to choose from if I ever needed it. And then usually go about 1.5 stops underexposed. I knew I wasn't, there's nothing really amazing or mind-blowing about anything outside. It's a lot of dead trees, dead grass, so I wasn't going to do anything fancy like window pulls or anything like that. Clearly I wanted to show some detail in the windows, so that's why I don't go all the way down to like -2 stops underexposed or anything like that. The other thing that I did is I started to, this is an old technique that I used, kind of a trick that I started using when I was shooting real estate. Since we had white walls and a white ceiling, I took this shot and bounced the light into kind of the corner of this room. The whole purpose of this shot was to really try to mimic natural light, but almost give it a little bit of that faux studio light look just for the left side of the dining space. That's it. Yeah, the shadows would be slightly harsher than they would be normally through natural window light, and they'd be a little darker. Then the shadows would be a little bit darker than they normally would with window light, but I was fine with that. That's why I was taking these shots. I knew that I would more than likely blend some elements of this frame into a natural frame to really almost give it a level of surrealism without going too far and making it look too much like a rendering or too flashy or fake. Did the same thing here. The purpose of this one was to, again, kind of mimic natural light on the right side of the dining space. Did the same thing here for the piano room, just shot that flash into the corner, again, kind of mimicking the direction that the natural light was coming. Did the stairwell. Purpose of this shot was kind of twofold. I wanted to get a little bit more detail and minimize the reflections in the wood floor, and also get some of that texture of the wood grain at from the top of the dining room table. This one for sure, what the whole purpose of this was to bounce light into the ceiling, and that soft light would come down and again really bring out the true nature, texture, and color of the dining room table. And as you could see from just even a natural frame, because that dining room table has a sheen and a gloss to it, that texture is almost completely gone. I definitely wanted to bring some of that back in post, back in the edit. So again, the reason I do these flash pops is usually for two reasons. One, I bring down the ambient light a little bit and shoot with the purpose of trying to mimic natural light. And in this frame, I believe I was shooting at 160th of a second. So the purpose was this, to basically remove 100% or as much as I could of the ambient light and light everything 100% with flash. So much like the reasons that I take bracket shots, I take 2 stops overexposed and all the way down to maybe 1.5 stops, sometimes 2 stops underexposed. The reason I do that, much like flashing elements of the room with this type of light, is not because I'm going to use every single frame. It's just so I have it in my back pocket. Yes, in this instance, I popped a flash into the ceiling and had soft light coming directly down to light up this counter in the left side of the dining room table. Did I think I was going to use this for sure 100% in post? No, but I wanted to at least have it. If for some reason in post I would need it, I know it's there. Now what you can't see in these images is that the ceiling itself was actually angled. So this helped me out a little bit. Again, knowing that I would not use 99% of what I was shooting here, I popped a flash into the ceiling, and knowing that by shooting it into the angled ceiling, it is actually going to light most of that scene from the same direction of the camera. And now if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that lighting wise, this is not ideal. You want that light coming towards or at least perpendicular to the camera. Main reason I did this was to really just kind of light everything equally and really double check the color. I didn't really think I was going to use this frame for anything, but just wanted to make sure I had it in my back pocket just in case. Now I brought out my secret weapon. In this instance, I decided to take the ambient light down a few clicks, let's say maybe a stop, maybe it's 1.5 stops underexposed, somewhere around there. But then bring out my octabox, my softbox, and light things up, mimicking natural light coming from, again, the same direction where most of the natural light's coming from. Fully realizing that although it is coming from the same direction that the natural light is, it doesn't look that natural. It still looks like it's kind of lit with studio or softbox light, but that's okay. I'm just lighting this just if I want to blend some elements of this into a natural frame. Same thing here, just kind of adding that somewhat faux surreal type of light to the right side of the dining room space. All right, so we're done lighting up things with the flash. And just for reference, at this point it is 9:43 in the morning. We are roughly 45 minutes into the shoot. And remember, this is for one photo. Okay, so we're in the actual Photoshop file. Now, I did not plan this. This was not my intention. But by trying different techniques as far as a launching point, I ended up using these backlit images or light that was coming from the same direction that the camera is pointed as my base images. This seems really, really counterintuitive based on some of the stuff I've said in other videos. But just the way everything was kind of playing out, this ended up being the easiest way to go. So my plan of attack in editing this image initially was to start with a natural ambient layer and then add and adjust on top of that. What I ended up deciding to do was start with a flash layer as my base and then kind of build everything up with flash layers on top of that. Then take a layer that was completely ambient, completely natural, and using the luminosity blend, start to bring in some of those natural highlights and shadows with the information that was given to me with the flash pops. So I took these two layers and blended them together using the lighten mode, and then started taking some of the flash pop layers and again using lighten mode, just add those and kind of stack one on top of the other to see what we could come up with. There's the staircase. So now what I wanted to do here in Photoshop was kind of rebuild the main space that was kind of the focal point of this being the dining room area and build it with flash layers, but I wanted to do this completely on its own. You'll see what I mean. So I started with this as kind of another base layer to piece together the flash layers for the dining room area. You can see here that by using one of the flash pops where I shot the flash into the ceiling to bring in a little bit more texture and detail, helped me kind of bring that back out into this dining room table. And we just kept going around the room, doing the same exact thing, slowly getting rid of myself, slowly evening the lighting out on the table, bringing in the flash on the left side. Same for the fireplace, right side of the dining room space, lifting the shadows on the left side of the counter, adding a little bit more light there to the left side, and then combining that with what I had already taken. Now, as you can see, this looks pretty terrible. This does not look remotely real. So this is where we start having a little fun and bringing some of that natural look back with, as you can see, this layer right here, the luminosity layer. So in Lightroom, I took this ambient layer and did some normal adjustments with highlights, shadows, contrast, brightness, whites, darks, all that good stuff. Brought it into Photoshop and then started to hand blend it in certain spots to really bring back that natural look. Did the same thing with the windows, and I brought back some of those reflections onto the dining room table. Now, if there were absolutely no reflections on the dining room table, that would look very, very fake. Here is an issue I ran into, and you might run into this a lot when you use the luminosity layer. Fairly simple, quick fix was to use a layer and change the blend mode to color, and then subtly paint in some of that. I sampled just kind of a tan brownish color from the surrounding wood panels, and then just decided to paint it in. But as you can tell, I did not leave it at 100%. I brought it back down to roughly to about 75, just to kind of, again, find that middle ground where someone is not going to be distracted by the discoloration. But if I turn it all the way up to 100%, you may not even be able to tell if you're watching this on YouTube, but it just doesn't look it doesn't look completely real. So I combine those two into a single layer, and then I start doing some of my fine tuning, my tweaking. Clearly, like I mentioned at the beginning, I had the couch and the chair to deal with, got rid of those. Even decided to level the rug. It was not placed 100% perfectly in the shot, so we had to level that out. And then the other part I noticed too was how uneven the rug felt in relation to the entire frame. So instead of taking the rug and trying to shift it over, I just decided to extend the rug and then kind of do a blend. It's one of those things I bet you wouldn't notice, but if you zoom in, I bet you could probably tell there's some clone work done on that rug. Once again, I combine everything back onto one layer, and then I do some more tweaking. For this layer here, I wanted to add a little bit more of that drama with highlights and shadows that I was getting from a layer where I lit this area up with the Octobox, with the softbox. So I blended that in a little bit with a brush, as you can see, a little bit before and after. I like the way too it was creating some of these vertical shadows through the wood slats there. And then the next layers, I tried my best to get rid of the fan that was popping into frame, as you can see at the very, very top. So kind of had to do some fake wall creation and do some blending there, combine it all back into another layer. I used a frame where I had lit the stairwell from the ceiling, added this into the stairs again, just to add a little bit more depth and dimension to the stairs because they were kind of getting lost completely in shadow. I use a filter that extracts just a little bit more detail, a little bit more contrast in an intelligent way, just to kind of give it a nice little polished look at the end of it. Curves wise, much like you probably saw in another video, I bump up the midtones a little bit. I want to give it that kind of bright, clean, fresh look. And there we go. This was the image that I presented back to the client. Now, that being said, when I turned this into the client still had a few notes for me. They realized that the can recess lights in the ceiling were a little bit of a distraction, so they wanted those gone. The speaker that's built into the wall that you see there on the side close to the counter, they wanted that gone. Another issue that we ran into concerning a majority of the photos, that they found the wood tones were a little bit too rich. They were a little bit too saturated for their taste. They compared it to a photo that they had taken with their iPhones, and they were correct. The way I had processed the photos, especially in Lightroom, were probably a little oversaturated, and especially when you clean up the white walls, it really makes those orange reddish tones in the wood really stand out even more. So as you can tell here in the final image that I delivered to the client, the wood tones are a little bit more subdued, but that was about the only feedback I received from the client. Other than that, everything was fantastic. All right, guys, so hopefully that gives you a little peek behind the curtain as to how sometimes a single image is put together. Sometimes it can be a lengthy, tedious process all for one photo, but many times it's worth it. If you followed me through the whole entire video, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to watch. If you got anything, and I mean anything out of the video, please make sure to give me one of these. If you're completely new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing. Feel free to follow me on the social medias, specifically Instagram. That's where I tend to post the most if I have time. Feel free to follow me there, and that'll do it for this video. Again, I appreciate you taking the time to watch, and we'll see you on the next one.